Fear not, citizens. Hope has arrived.
Because I am here. Good morning, good afternoon, and good night, and welcome to the pod where we chat, argue, wax poetic about the movies that we love, hate, or that are simply worth talking about. Movies have always something to say, and we love trying to analyze what they capture. Welcome to the Shatter After as we begin to celebrate the summer of Superman. I am Brandon Alvarado, one of your hosts, and I am here with the Shatter After Unlimited crew, Cliff and Mike. What is up, guys?
You said unlimited, and the Justice League theme just started playing in my head. The da-da-da, da-da-da, da-da. And you know who opens that intro, right? It's just Superman staring you straight in the face.
Yes.
So I'm here. I'm happy. I'm excited to talk about Superman. Top 3 favorite characters of all time. So this is gonna be fun.
Cliff, you're excited to talk soups?
Man, I'm so excited to talk about this man. My favorite nerd, my favorite nerdy, goofy, just beautiful man. I can't wait to get into this. It's gonna be a fun time. We're about to go through childhood, everything.
Oh, we're gonna do the whole thing, and we're excited to celebrate the summer of Superman with 3 awesome episodes that will happen throughout June and when the movie comes out. Because as you guys know, on July 11th, Superman is coming to theaters. We're going to talk about Superman. And on this episode, we are starting with a special edition of Film Sessions for the Shatter After, where we're going to be exploring Superman on film. And what we're going to be arguing and discussing is Superman in theaters, silver screen. So we're going to talk about Christopher Reeve. We're going to talk about Brandon Routh's take. We're going to talk about Henry Cavill. And we're going to talk about our hopes and dreams that lie on the shoulders of David Corn Sweat. We're going to talk about what worked, what didn't, and also share our thoughts and our disappointments and things that we enjoyed throughout our lives as we have tried and seeked to enjoy Superman on film. So guys, let's get into it. And to start off, we have to talk about the one that started it all in the sense of the new era of Superman films. And we got to talk about Christopher Reeve. What a phenomenal actor and what a phenomenal portrayal of Clark Kent / Superman. I still go back as I was getting ready for this coverage. I remember the poster. Of course, I wasn't alive back then, but I've had great encounters with this film. Some of my most beloved watchings with my cousin Mario. I still remember the poster, "You'll Believe a Man Can Fly." And for the time, this movie really made us believe. Not just because of the effects of the time, but how Christopher Reeve carried that character. It is just so iconic. And when you guys saw those films for the first time, I don't know if you guys have seen all 4 or have you seen at least the first 2, because some people think that quadrilogy of movies is actually just a duology. But what are your thoughts on the Christopher Reeve era of Superman?
Christopher Reeve era Superman. This is so interesting for me because this is one of the last iterations of the character I was exposed to growing up as a kid. My mom was a massive retro TV fan, so I watched George Reeves TV shows like Black and White
when you were a kid.
When I was a kid, and I'm
Nice.
watching the Fleischer shorts, and then I watched Superman the Animated Series and Justice League. So this movie was not my first introduction to Superman. Being the film nerd that I am, right, watching this at 10 years old, and I've already seen Justice League Unlimited a million times, I still had that appreciation because on the cover of the VHS tape, it says, "You'll Believe a Man Can Fly." And this is the first live action Superman that I've ever seen. And that is still very special, right? I did see a man fly for the first time with this movie. And I think just the appreciation and reverence that people have for it to this day, right? Influencing movies like Sam Raimi's Spider-Man, which is something I did grow up with, or Patty Jenkins' Wonder Woman, right? It's so interesting how much of the spirit carries on and how much Christopher Reeve embodied that era, that golden age interpretation of Superman. And so, yeah, I don't think I love this movie as much as people who watched this when they were like 5 years old, coming into it late. But I still can appreciate this like moment in film history and how important Christopher Reeve was to this character, because he just embodies Superman. He embodies the kindness, the heart, the humility, right? He's also one of the few actors who can properly do the switch from Clark Kent to Superman in an instant.
Oh, this is probably my favorite Superman movie. It's the one I grew up with. I was talking to Brandon earlier on screen. Mike, you might have missed this part, but I had mentioned that I had this and Quest for Peace on VHS tape as a kid.
Whoa.
Yeah, it's very weird. That's why when Sentry pops up in Thunderbolts, all I see is Nuclear Man, because I'm just like, I've seen this before. Like, this is adorable. I love this and whatnot.
I've seen this movie.
Exactly. But yeah, so this has a very special place in my heart that literally I watched this for the first time in years. February of last year. Because I don't know if y'all remember where I was doing like my like quick live action Superman deep dive or whatever. It actually in preparation for this upcoming movie. And yeah, it's just so many things I love about this. It does everything I love about movie making and just like comic book adaptations, especially within the context of where Superman exists, like in comics at the time. This is before John Byrne did the reboot where, we actually focus on Clark Kent more so than just Superman. So it exists in a very specific like time frame in history for me. But I love Christopher Reeve in this. I love his switch between Clark Kent and Superman. I love how the movie just starts with like a 10-minute intro with Jonathan Williams' musical score. That thing that most movies don't do anymore. Batman '89 and like Sam Raimi's Spider-Man is the last one that gives us these beautiful just musical themes that set the tone for the movie and lets it transports you into another world. The same thing that the James Bond movies do and all that stuff. But yeah, it's a classic movie, underdog story. It has so many fantastical elements that I just really love about it, and great costume, fun special effects, and just I love it. It's 4-star movie for me.
This movie, and I think it's we're gonna start digging into it and breaking apart what of Superman really stands out positively and what of Superman doesn't work. But there's no one of the things that I think that stands out to me of the Reeve era of Superman is that Superman is fun. He is a character that we want to be around. You know what I mean? Like, it is a welcoming presence to anyone that's saved by him and everyone that sees him. And I think that is such a very important quality in the character of Superman, because one of the things that stand out in most comic books, at least when it comes towards Superman's interaction with the world and the people at large, is that the people of the world love and respect Superman. You know what I mean? Like most of the antagonistic forces against Superman it's like governments, corporations, people that only think of themselves, but like the public as a whole embrace the character, embrace him as a hero and what he represents for the most part. And I love how Christopher Reeve Superman is fun. Welcome, like when you watch him, you just smile. Like it produces that sense of a friend, like he would describe him in interviews. Like it has that effect on those that see him. And I think that's what stands out the most in this era of Superman is that the problem with these films is not the interpretation of the character. It's not the interpretation of Clark Kent. It's not the interpretation of Superman. I would say it's the world that he's surrounded by, because it is a world that's really more into this vaudeville-esque classic comedy radio feel world that's really not influenced by the comic book lore. It's not really influenced by the comic book world that Superman really belongs to. Like if it, with the very big exception of Superman 2, But then again, the Zod that we see in Superman 2 is not comic book Zod. It is a creation for the films that then influences comic book Zod into what Zod is now in the comics.
Yeah.
Do you guys agree or disagree with that observation? Because I think Superman is perfect, but the world that surrounds him is what prevents it from being a complete, full lived Superman world.
I would say Superman's been a character that's been around for almost 100 years. And so Superman the movie's interpretation of Metropolis, right? We can say now it doesn't reflect what comic book Metropolis is, but when in his first appearance, right, where he's faster than a speeding bullet, leaping tall buildings in single bounds, he's not fighting these super villains. He's fighting like bank robbers. He's fighting wife beaters, like Superman was a man of the people. I think that's what made him so endearing, is that he was helping be a superhuman in everyday situations, right? And so he's stopping petty crimes. He in his first appearance, he's essentially doing what Batman does in his like first 20 issues of comics. He's not fighting kaiju or billionaires or anything until a little bit later on. And so I think this first movie specifically is kind of doing that, because Lex, his entire plan in that first film is like real estate. And it's like he's just a crappy, like evil businessman, but not like super genius making robots that we know today. But it's like, dude, you're doing a really bad thing and you're going to destroy California in the process because of your evil machinations. I've got to stop you. And so I think for the era that it's echoing, like first 2 years of Superman, right? Like in the 40s, I think it does a good job. However, this is a movie that came out in 1978, and it doesn't reflect the Superman of 1978 exactly. So as like an homage to the past, I think it works. But yeah, it wasn't reflecting the modern era at the time, nor what the character would become later on.
So would you say that what works to its detriment is the fact that it's funny, even though it's the first iteration of the character in live action, it is still living in the bubble of decades past, as opposed to trying to be present with the literature at the time?
I mean, yeah, because at the time people didn't take comic books seriously, right? So like Donner and the writers on that film are very much like, well, this is what I remember Superman as a kid. And that's the feeling that you get of the Superman they felt as a child is what's present on screen, not necessarily what's reflective of the comics, and it's kind of, not to jump ahead, but it's kind of what's happening now, right? Where it's like the James Gunn Superman feels like the Superman he grew up with. The Superman of today has like 3 kids and a wife, you know? And so it's not really reflective. We're always like echoing back to, this is how I remember the character. And I think that's kind of what happened here, where they know the planet blows up. They know he ends up on Earth. We'll make it up as we go, because that's what the original comics did. But once the lore was established, I don't think they really knew that was happening in 1977 when they were writing that script.
I don't know, because I don't necessarily have an argument against what either of you say. I think, because in fact, I think I agree, because as we all know, that's kind of just the nature of filmmaking. No one really thinks about, what impact this will have on the future, interpretations of this character. Because to me, I think we can probably all agree that this version of Superman is very fantastical. It's more so a fantasy movie as opposed to like sci-fi almost. Like, I get it, we have another planet, we have these elements of sci-fi, but it's not presented in this way or in that way specifically. Krypton is this overly bright planet where they have a system of everyone wears the same clothing. Their light bill has to be extremely high at this point, in the franchise, where it seems like they come from a people who have ascended, the everyday difficulties of Earthlings, of humans. So when Clark comes in, he kind of he feels like another being, but he's still fantastic. He's still fantastical to some nature, So to I guess I would have to watch the Fleischer animated clips of. Again, I haven't seen those in years, so it's been a long time since I've watched those movies. But yeah, this it feels more so like, hey, we're making a fantasy movie instead of making, the kaiju fighting, the guy who interacts with the new gods, the guy who teams up with Batman type of character that most of us know. This is dude comes to Earth. He's raised by parents, and he's given morals and ethical values that this is a movie where he's walking in his purpose, if you will. And he's just helping people fight everyday problems, essentially, which in the 70s, you can argue could have been accurate. Obviously we had a lot of turmoil and different things going on, but I think within the 70s, it kind of fits for me. I think if what I'm saying makes sense.
Oh yeah, it definitely makes sense. I just want to highlight this is the same like time period where the Super Friends and stuff is happening as well. That's all I mean. It's like he's teaming up with Batman and Wonder Woman already in this era, and this movie is like, yeah, we're not doing that. We're going back.
Well, I will put it this way:
a little bit.
Most of the time, movies are also late to the game in terms of interpretations as well. It's like it's a funny dichotomy. Like they influence, but they also are so far behind the curve in terms of what this character's already done in other mediums, if that makes sense.
They still got the character right.
Yeah, in spite of all of that.
And that's the biggest thing, right? The character is right. I think it's because we are so removed of the era that it belongs to. In retrospect, I think we all have the tendency, I'm guilty of wanting to insert what we know to be the literature. And I think it goes back to what you were saying, Mike. It's that at the moment, there wasn't really that much steam in terms to the literature that was available. It all came back to what they knew of the character and what worked for them and for that character, what reminds them. It's a very personal take on the character, and I think I think I'm so surprised that the interpretation of the character still stands the test of time. But the interpretation of the other elements are what I would say are questionable to me. Like I don't really I don't really know what the Lex Luthor of those times was like, and if the Hackman version is anywhere close to it. It
kind of.
There is something there.
Yeah, I mean, Lex obviously becomes genius level intellect as time goes on, but yeah, he really was just fat bald guy that Superman had beef with. Like one of the first appearances, like Superman made him lose his hair, and that's why he has a grudge against Superman. It's like, okay.
So in other words, this is Lex Luthor. Like for the first couple of issues.
I mean, honestly, when you think about how people probably perceived Lex Luthor at the time, Gene Hackman was probably the best interpretation people saw before. And that's my point of like remembering the era that we're in when we're talking about this.
How do we feel? Because I noticed a lot of people also, I've noticed a lot of podcasts, they don't even talk about this, whether or not it has any significance, but in terms of like director's influence on this as well. Because looking at Richard Donner's like IMDb credits, the movie he directed before this was The Omen, which, is one of the most like impressive and, influential horror mystery thriller. I haven't actually seen it, but I know it has impacted films to come in the future, right? And afterwards he did like The Goonies and did Lethal Weapon, which are three drastically different movies. How do y'all feel that Richard Donner's influence was on this character? Because Brandon, you mentioned it arguably is probably the most definitive version of Superman. That most people, I'm sure, I don't know, maybe how younger generations feel. They're probably more akin to Man of Steel, probably. I don't know, and whatnot. But like, do y'all think Richard Donner's, stylistic artistry is like smack dab, like also responsible for this take on Superman?
Mario has a great episode on his podcast, Superman on Film. You guys should check it out, where he talks about how Superman, the movie, is like a blueprint, and talks about how that movie came to be. It's a very interesting story, and I think it talks about how that story was rewritten and like the genesis of it and stuff like that. Like the guy that wrote The Godfather did the script. Like it's there's a lot.
That's another thing to take, like, again, knowing how Hollywood worked at the time. The guy who wrote The Godfather wrote the script of this, but also like Gene Hackman wanted to be in this movie because he loved Superman. And
Mhm.
it's like we're still in the era of the movie star, right? I know we've talked about how like that's kind of gone away in modern times, but very famous people
Say
wanted to
that
be
to Mission Impossible: The Final Reckoning.
Tom Cruise is the last one. This is a big deal, man. No, but like the fact that very famous people wanted to be a part of this project and they came in, but that also influences the character, right? Because we need to let Gene Hackman shine. So we're not going to just have him be like stoic Lex Luthor who just kind of sits there and broods and gets mad about Superman, right? We have to have
Miss
him.
Tessmacher.
Right, you want him animated, you want him hamming it up because you want to showcase this incredible talent we've landed, but also
Yes.
this unknown actor that people don't know has to be a believable Superman. And I think Donner and company were genius casting Christopher Reeve in this role because they could have gone with a known face, a known name, right? But they're like, we want to have somebody who can just become the character, and you just see Superman,
Yeah.
and that's an impressive feat. And Christopher Reeve, man, like he is just so freaking good, almost too good. And one of the faults of this film is that he's too good, and years to come, no one could live up to it. And that's something that we're going to talk about later. But it's like he
Yes.
was too good in this role,
Yes. Yes.
and I'd argue that's why so many people found Superman boring. It's kind of this weird antithesis, right? Of like he was so good at becoming this godlike figure, right?
It became a
That
niche. Like it became. He became the cast, and whenever you try to put anything within that cast, if it wasn't perfect just like that, it it just wouldn't work.
not just that, but the way that he plays the character is why
Yes.
people think Superman is
Yes.
that way. Because it's like, has he done anything wrong in these films? Like, has Clark Kent made a mistake, a massive mistake in these movies? Right? Like, I don't think he has. I don't think there's ever a moment where I'm like, oh, you messed up here, Clark. You messed up here, Superman. And I think that's why people have this bad conception of Superman as boring because he's perfect. And
Mhm.
I don't even think the movies were even trying to say that he was perfect, but this man was just so charismatic. And since we didn't give him glaring faults, people perceived him as perfect for like 50 years.
I think when you were talking about the casting, I think you answered Cliff's question. Like, yes, definitively, the vision of the director, the vision of the people in charge is what drove to the casting of Christopher Reeve, and
Yeah.
and give us this amazing interpretation of the character.
Yeah, that's great because I was going to say, like, in comparison to Batman '89, it influenced it, but I don't think it changed the full trajectory. I don't know. Like, I feel like Batman animated series probably did a lot more work for Batman in the long run than '89 did, arguably.
For the general populace, but for film lovers, Batman
Mm,
'89 is it's testament. You know what I mean?
mm.
Oh,
It's
trust
where
me. We can spend another 2 hours on Batman. That
yeah.
when Batman 2 comes out, we'll do this again.
Yes, we'll just go back. We'll do another film session. But yes, Christopher Reeve, what a great place to start. I think I still I'm guilty of trying to find. I would love him. I would love to see a modern take of the character with that level of heart, because the right lessons are there to be learned for new creatives, right? Because undoubtedly the one thing they got right was the character. They got Superman right, which I think it's why those movies till today, when you watch them, you cannot deny that it is Superman.
This was part 1 of 4 in our Superman series. Thank you guys so much for watching. It was really fun getting into Superman the movie and talking about its place in Superman history. Next week, we're going to be talking about Superman Returns. We can't wait to break that down and get into the weird, the awkward, the confusing aspects and direction of Superman Returns. So make sure you like and subscribe so you don't miss a thing. Talk to us in the comments. Tell us your thoughts on Superman the movie and what you look forward to from James Gunn's next interpretation of Superman, kicking off a new universe for DC. It's going to be such a fun time. We want to talk to you guys. Tell us what you guys think in the comments, and we will see you guys next week in the next video.